Welcome to the Embodiment Matters podcast with me, Erin Giesemann-Rabke, and my beloved Carl Rabke. We don't have the luxury of living in ordinary times, but rather we live in extraordinary ones where the way we live in the next decade will make a huge difference in the future of life on planet Earth. We aspire in this tapestry of rich conversations drawn from a variety of wise perspectives to share resources to help you embody the wisdom, compassion, and skillful actions that are needed during these times. You can find out more about our classes and sign up for our newsletter at embodimentmatters.com. You can also become a supporting member of our podcast with a small monthly donation. Look for Embodiment Matters at patreon.com. Hi friends, it's Erin here, and I am so thrilled to share this episode with you, in which I have the great privilege of interviewing one of my hero writers, Kathleen Dean Moore, whose 2016 book titled Great Tide Rising: Toward Clarity and Moral Courage in a Time of Planetary Change was life-changing for me. In this beautiful conversation, we talk about the extinction crisis, about what love really means, about the importance of facing grief directly, yet also the importance of locking the door to despair. I have long loved the way Kathleen weaves a rich multiplicity of perspectives into her writing, that of mother, grandmother, naturalist, philosopher, professor, and earth lover. Kathleen speaks so beautifully about moral courage in these times, about the shift in her writing from praising the beauty of the natural world in her earlier books to a fierce call to defend it. We discuss some favorite passages from Great Tide Rising, as well as from her gorgeous new book called Earth's Wild Music. This is coming out mid-February 2021. I find her work and her words so simultaneously heartening, sobering, and a powerful spur to caring action. I hope you enjoy her as much as I did. I can't recommend her books highly enough. I hope you'll also check out one of her recent projects, Music to Save Earth's Songs. She's developed this as part of the Spring Creek Project at Oregon State University, and it includes 24-minute-long concerts, which weave music and spoken word, words that are excerpted from her new book. You can find details in the show notes. Kathleen Dean Moore, PhD, served as Distinguished Professor of Environmental Philosophy at Oregon State University, where she wrote award-winning books about our cultural and moral relations to the wet, wild world and to one another. But her increasing concern about the climate and extinction crises led her to leave the university so she could write and speak full-time about the moral urgency of climate action. Since then, she has spoken out across the country, publishing Moral Ground, Ethical Action for a Planet in Peril, a collection of short essays by the world's moral leaders about our obligations for the future. That book is followed by Great Tide Rising, Toward Clarity and Moral Courage in a Time of Planetary Change, Earth's Wild Music, celebrating and defending the songs of the natural world, and Bearing Witness, the human rights case against fracking and climate change, coming April 2021. Her work on the extinction crisis includes a film, The Extinction Variations, a collaboration with a classical pianist. She writes from Corvallis, Oregon, and from an off-the-grid cabin where two creeks and a bear trail meet a coastal inlet in Alaska. You can find her wonderful books if you go to goodreads.com and search Kathleen Dean Moore. She has many more books than I've listed here. And if you visit our show notes, you can find details about an upcoming online book launch party for Earth's Wild Music, as well as a link to listen to Music to Save Earth's Songs. Enjoy! So hi and welcome, Kathleen. I'm so thrilled to talk with you today.
Thank you, Erin. It's a real honor to be here.
Thank you so much. I know I mentioned this to you earlier, but I just have to say, I am so moved by your writing. It's been like life changing. Reading your words have been really life changing for me. And it's just really thrilling for me to be able to talk with you and to share you and your work with people in our audience. And, the way we often start these conversations is to ask about embodiment. And, my experience in reading your writings is that you're someone who embodies your values. You walk your talk. And there's so many ways to think about and conceptualize what embodiment means. And just if we start there, what does that light up in you today?
Well, that lights up relief in me, honestly, because I can't say that I know what embodiment means to you or what it means to me, but definitely making your life into a work of art that embodies your deepest values is the opportunity that's available to us. And what a joy it is when that actually works. So I like that notion of putting your heart into your work, putting your mind into your work in your hands, so that there is no gap between what you believe is right and what you do. Philosophers call that integrity. Embodiment might be a nicer way to think about it. At any rate, what it's thinking about is wholeness, oneness, like an integer, a whole number, where there is no division in us, but we are what we believe.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I resonate so much with in your work and your words is there's a way in which how do I want to say this? I experience a real synthesizing of maybe many different roles. You write as a mother and a grandmother and a professor and a naturalist, and shift back and forth between these perspectives. And also, let me see if I can find the exact phrase someone used about your book. Was it joyous and somber? This range that is both invites a kind of even more intimate falling in love with the world, like the poetry of Mary Oliver invites, and this sobering, heartbreaking bearing witness to what's happening in the world right now. And I'd just love you to talk a little bit about where does your writing come from? What do you want people to feel and know and do as a result of reading?
Yeah, the thing that everyone who's been in the academic world for any length of time at all will know that in academics, the pressure is always on you to be one thing. Mm-hmm. In philosophy, if you stray a little bit from philosophy, people will say, well, but is it philosophy? Mm-hmm. As if that mattered, as if the name for things mattered. In my mind, you open your mind, you open your heart to everything that comes in, and then you try to make some meaning out of it. So I was raised by scientists, by people who loved natural history and were experts in botany. I married a scientist, a natural history person whose expertise was in neuroendocrinology and in herbs, lizards, frogs, snakes. Mm-hmm. My son is a biologist, so our friends are biologists. And so the natural history part of my life came just by living with my family and my friends. And so the natural history roots of my work are very deep inside me. The issue you raise about, well, I think we should go there. You talk about how can you integrate not only all these different fields, which I try to integrate the kind of clarity you find in philosophy and the wisdom in natural history, and the kind of moral impetus that a writer can summon. Mm-hmm. I try to combine those all in my writing. Mm-hmm. But what interested me in what you just said was, how do you combine emotions like joy and sorrow? How do you navigate? Shall we go there?
Oh, I mean, it's there's so much I resonate in your work with, but yes, let's please go there. It feels like such an important invitation to aliveness and honesty. Yeah.
It has been on my mind so much because the work that I've been doing in the last few years is about extinction.
Mhm.
and about the extinction crisis, which is tragic, horrible, and dangerous and sacrilegious.
Mhm.
And it carries with it this terrible sadness, a sadness as big as the universe, the disappointment of the universe to see us wrecking what was given to us with such generosity. At the same time, I love the natural world. It makes me happy to be in it. I was just at the Oregon coast where the sun was hitting the spindrift and the waves were crashing in, and I was just happy.
Mhm.
So I don't know how you, but I know that you can mix those. And I think that it's important to be honest about both of those. How, as a writer, to include them both is a constant struggle.
Mhm. I think you do such a gorgeous job of it. I know, I don't know if it was the first book of yours that I read, but it was the one that really pierced me was Great Tide Rising. That is so simultaneously awful and scary and sobering, and then the most gorgeous, inspiring. It's just this dance back and forth. And as I'm reading your new book, Earth's Wild Music, it's just a similar beautiful dance back and forth between this bearing witness to the gorgeousness and the specificity and the loss. And, you know, I was thinking of this quote. One of my really dearest friends, who's also a writer, loves to quote Robin Morgan, who says, "Hate generalizes, love specifies." And as I was reading
Hmm.
Wild Music, the specificity and the love that comes through, um, for everything you write about, the specificity of meadowlarks or frogs or the songs of wolves or the music of the spines on a cactus, are just extraordinary. I don't know if you want to riff off of that.
the, the Great Tide Rising is a really good example of what we're talking about, and I think it's lovely of you, Aaron, to call it a dance between the really quite um, joyous celebration that is in the essays and the analytic critique that's in the rumination part. And you call it a dance, which is a beautiful thing because in some ways I think of it as a train wreck. I think of it as if you're going to do both those things, just do it and don't pretend you aren't. And so what I've done, I decided finally to do in both of the books that you mentioned was go ahead and let myself be glad and go ahead and let myself be in the moment. But then come back to analyze it and to think about it and to make really quite critical and suggestions about how we might change civilization to save it. So what I did in the Earth's Wild Music was I went ahead and wrote the essay I wanted to write about an animal that sings, makes music. And then in a box at the end of every chapter, I put the statistics about their demise.
Mhm.
So, for example, talk about specificity, I wrote about the Western sage grouse,
Mhm.
and then, which is lovely, does this lovely dance on its neck in blowing snow, transforming its body into a remarkable dancer. And then at the end of that essay, I put in a box the fact that of the number of sage grouse that used to be there on the prairie a century ago, we have exactly 2% left,
Mm.
and that they are being driven to extinction by the destruction of their habitat, by cattle, by the pumping by fracking, by highways, by subdivisions, by this human destruction of the land that they need, cattle primarily.
Mhm.
So that people know um, after they've had this chance to be so happy about this bird that we face its utter loss.
Mhm. Yeah, I love. It's like it's a little bit sneaky. It's wonderful the way you do that in each section of the book with those little boxes of first you invite us to fall in love, and then there's this devastating statistic. And you know,
Maybe, maybe it's maybe it's inviting you to fall in love, or maybe it's asking you to remember how much you do love the
Yes.
natural world.
I already just
Um,
want to cry talking to you. Yeah.
I would rather remind you of how you feel than primrose path you into something that's not already there.
Yeah. Um, I have a son who's 10 years old, maybe of a similar age when I was reading Great Tide Rising about you writing about being with your grandchildren. And
Yes.
I have, been in love with the world and cared about the future and environment and all of this as long as I can remember, but something lands so different for me as a parent. And in this, it's incredibly sobering to consider what world are these kids going to be growing up into. And there's this paragraph I'd love to read from one of your essays that you include in the recent book. Poets warned us, writing of the heartbreaking beauty that will remain when there is no heart to break for it. But what if it's worse than that? What if it's the heartbroken children who remain in a world without beauty? How will they find solace in a world without wild music? How will they thrive without green hills edged with oaks? How will they forgive us for letting the frog song slip away? When my granddaughter looks back at me, I'll be on my knees begging her to say I did all I could. And then you say, I didn't do all I could have done. And I carry questions like this with me every day. And it's what do we do?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about that, but it's an important question.
It is. And we carry it with us, as you say. Think back about when your child was born and you held that child in your arms safe and you said promises to that child. You made promises. I will always love you. I will always keep you safe. I will give you the world.
Mm-hmm.
How are we going to keep those promises now? And what more terrible thing can we imagine than breaking a promise we made to a newborn child?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have to think about what love means. That essay goes on to say, loving isn't a kind of la-di-da.
Mm-hmm.
Loving is a sacred trust. To love somebody is to devote your life to their thriving and to defend their world faithfully and fiercely for all time. That's what a promise means. That's what love means.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, failing in that is what betrayal means.
Mm-hmm. I have another passage here I want to read to you. Again, this is this stretch you invite us into. Be prepared for anger and for grief. Be prepared also for gratitude. Be prepared with the strongest moral resolve to guarantee that no more ancient forests will be sold out from under our children. They're not ours to sell. They belong to the future of the everlasting earth. Maybe I just want to ask, how is it for you personally in that stretch or that dance, that bearing witness? How do you not get lost in one side or the other?
Right. Well, let's go there then, Erin. Let's go to grief. Because I think it's important for us to acknowledge that if we were to face the future directly, if we were to acknowledge what we have done, we would be overcome with grief. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. If grief comes to us, I think we should open the door and let it in, and let grief sit beside us and stroke our hair, and let grief bring us a cup of tea, and let grief remind us that if we didn't love it so much, and if the things we're about to lose weren't so extraordinarily beautiful and beloved, that we wouldn't feel this. And so grief, in a way, is a kind of honoring. It's an expression of gratitude. The measure of your grief, I think, is a measure of your love and gratitude for the world. It also is a way of acknowledging that what we are about to lose or have lost is of immense worth and meaning. So I think it's important to distinguish between grief and despair.
Mm-hmm.
If despair comes to your door and knocks on your door, I think it's very important to lock it, double lock it, and pull down the blinds, because despair, unlike grief, I believe despair is a denial of all meaning and all beauty.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way of giving up on the world and saying it doesn't matter. It isn't there anymore. It has no meaning. It has no beauty. It means nothing to me. That's what leads you to despair, and that is a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've written a piece where I say, let despair, pace down your sidewalk, smoking a cigarette, throwing evil looks towards your house, but do not let it in.
Mm-hmm.
It will destroy you, and by that means destroy everything.
Mm-hmm. I'm just I have looked at the structure of a few of your recent books, and in Great Tide Rising, the sections are, it's wrong to wreck the world is what we start with. Then a call to care, a call to witness, and a call to act. I think that's such a wonderful prescription. Do you want to say anything about that? And then I'll ask about the new book in a moment.
The usual pattern for a book about climate change is to give us 9 out of 10 chapters that are absolutely devastating, that knock your stilts out, that give you no reason to hope and give you evidence that we are on a very, very dangerous path. And then in the last chapter to say, but there's hope. Don't worry, there's hope. And here's how you ought to feel about this. You ought to feel that things can turn around.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I resent that very much. I feel played with. I feel that kind of a book is a dishonest book. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the examples people give about reasons for hope, mm-hmm. the fact is that they're not so much reasons for hope as they're not evidence of people going around hoping. They're evidence of people going around engaging in the struggle. Mm. So rather than leave people with this notion that, oh yeah, everything's going to be fine after everything I told you wasn't going to be fine, mm-hmm. I would rather leave people with the notion that, the difference between really terrible and a little bit terrible is huge. Mm-hmm. The difference between this much heating on the planet and this much heating on the planet is a difference between life and death. So we are bound to the struggle. We are called to the struggle. Call out everything ferocious in you and engage so you can save what you love too much to lose. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily hoping, but not being able necessarily to call up hope in your heart, but able to call up moral courage. That's what I was trying to do with that book.
Mm-hmm. Well, it rocked my world. And I think I struggle with those other kinds of climate books that you're talking about as well.
Yeah.
I just love your way. In Earth's Wild Music, you have tremble, weep, awaken, and sing out. You want to say anything about that?
Well, you see me working with the tropes of music. You see me starting out with the notion that all music, but in fact all life, is trembling. The vibrations of the universe. We tremble before the universe, and sometimes we break into song, which is its own kind of trembling. That vibration. Mm-hmm. Then we do go to weeping. There are losses that we face. There are things that we're destroying that we love. We end up with awakening. Well, we move on then to awakening, the notion that it's really important to see what's going on. You can't turn your back on it. You can't deny it. It's very, very important to be alert. I was telling my neighbor about this book, and I was telling her about the extinctions of songbirds. And she said, wait, is that a thing?
Oh. And
I go, yes, that is a thing. In the time I've been writing about the natural world, 60% of the mammals, the individual mammal numbers are gone. Mm. And in that time, 30% of the songbirds are gone. Mm. And I mean, gone. these are individual birds gone. And when you talk about the prairie species, 60% of them are gone. The planet itself, of the biomass of the mammalian biomass on the planet, let me see if I can get this right. 34% is human beings, 4% is wild creatures, and 60% is cows and other bloviating livestock. That is a thing. We have to be awakened to it somehow. And then once we're awakened, then the last thing is to sing out. Sing out. It's a call to witness. It's a call to speak your grief. It's a call to speak your outrage. It's a call to action. That's the only place I know to end a book. I don't know anywhere else, except, of course, books always end with gratitude, with the acknowledgments. And that should guide us in everything we do.
It's beautiful. How did you get interested in the subject of music, which, it's such a fascinating book, starting with sound. And since I started reading that book, I've been so much more attuned to the wild sounds. My husband and I got to go out to Great Salt Lake, and for many years I've tried to see them, and I have not had success until this year. We saw this huge group of migrating Arctic tundra swans.
And did you?
Wild songs. And I was thinking of you, and it's such a beautiful way in. And I know maybe you want to talk a little bit about the music project.
Oh, I'd love to. Let me tell you that I live in the Willamette Valley in Oregon, and this is the time when the geese are overhead in these huge flocks, and they are so raucous, and they weave and they collide, and they make the patterns in the air, but the real patterns are in the music that they make. All that honking, it's wonderful. So I envy you, your tundra swan. I don't understand how music goes straight into our hearts, but I know that it does. And I've asked my friends who are musicians to explain that to me. And I've learned a couple of the things that pianists or composers, for example, do to help make music sad. I've learned about hollow chords, for example, where a lot of really sad music has chords that have the first and the fifth, but they don't have anything in the middle. And I've learned about the augmented fourth, which my pianist friend calls the sound of human longing, which is repeated in the call of the loon, in the call of the wolf, and in such songs as Maria. That tone from the first to the fourth, Maria. That's the. And so I'm trying to learn it from a scientific point of view or from a musical point of view, but I don't know how it does that. But I do know that music speaks to us directly, and that if you want to carry something into a person's heart, you might ask music to carry it, which is why I chose music as the theme for this Earth's Wild Music. The notion that if we lose an animal, we lose its song, and if we lose a species, we lose that song forever. And we not only lose that, we also lose any songs that might have evolved from it, because of course the songs are in constant motion. So it just seemed to me that if we understood the magnitude, the enormity of that loss through music, maybe we would be called to action.
I can't remember, I'm not going to find the paragraph right now, but somewhere in the book where you are speaking with someone, you can give the full story because I'm going to forget the context, who wants you to speak about this without using the L word of love. And it was so fascinating that you come to listening to is another way to say that, or another expression of love, which resonates with me so deeply. Can you give us a little bit more about that?
So here I am in an auditorium in Portland, and it is filled with forest engineers. The phrase that people call them, which isn't flattering, it's the timber beasts, the ones whose work is to get as much possible product out of a forest as they can. I was worried about saying what I was going to say to that group, and in fact, the people who had invited me had arranged for people to escort me off the stage because they thought that I might not get a good reception from these people. The fact is that they did want to talk. And what they wanted to talk about was the pieces of land that they had in their family for a generation or so, and
Mm.
how much they loved that land and how much they cared for it. And that's what this one man said to me. The only thing that makes me really uncomfortable about what you say is that you keep using that L word.
Mm.
And I thought, well, L word, what is the L word? And he said, yeah, the love. Could you talk about it without talking about love? Because love makes me and my colleagues uncomfortable, engineers as we are. So I thought, what would you use? What word would you use? And he thought for a long, long time. And then he said, listen. And I thought, yes, listen to, attend to with all your attention, hold a place for it in your consciousness, want to be close to it, let it speak to you. And I started to think, listening is sounding an awful lot like love.
Mhm. It just lands so deeply in me. I love that. Um, in one of my favorite pieces of your writing that I return to again and again is Refugia. It's the story of Mount St. Helens and the dire predictions, and then um, what happened, which helps a lot. I mean, I don't know if you want to tell that story, but it's so good. I appreciate it so much.
Yes, well, 1980, the top blows off of Mount St. Helens, and down here, 100, 150 miles away, ash is filling our landscape and piling in windrows on our front porches. No one ever expected that the life would come back to Mount St. Helens for years and years and years. But in fact, when the scientists landed in their helicopters and started looking for life, they found it everywhere. And it turns out that life didn't have to come back into that wasteland from the edges, that there were refugia, there were safe places all over the landscape where little tiny bits of life had endured. There were places underneath a log, for example, or in a tunnel underneath a rock, or in the eddy in a little stream. And from there, life just flourished and spread, wildflowers, frogs, coyotes, all across this landscape. Well, the metaphor, the analogy is unmistakable, that if we are going to create disturbances in the landscape that are as catastrophic as a volcanic explosion, if we are going to shake the foundations of the earth, then we need to also be creating refuges or places of safety where life can be preserved and can emerge blinking into the sunlight to reconstitute the earth. Maybe it's just a little refuge, a little park. Maybe it's a nature preserve in your own little tiny city backyard. Maybe it's a garden. Maybe it's a bicycle cooperative. Maybe it's a collection of neighbors concerned about introducing their children to one another. Wherever life flourishes, hang on to that, because those will be the places that life can come from again.
Mm-hmm. There's a phrase you use that I have thought of so many times where you say, it doesn't matter what it is. If it's generous to life, imagine it into existence. I think that's such a wonderful prescription.
Joanna Macy says something very similar. She says, when people say there's so many things, I mean, everywhere I look, there's a problem. How could a person even begin? She says, you don't have to do it all. Just choose what you love and devote everything you have to it. That's very good advice.
And how do I want to say it? To invite people into engagement through the doorway of love instead of that fear and devastating. People don't want to move toward that, devastating predictions. And here's another phrase of yours that I love so much. There is hope in this, an attention that notices and celebrates thriving where it occurs, a consciousness or a conscience that refuses to destroy it. I love that. So beautiful.
You read very beautifully, Erin. Thank you for doing the honor to those words. We do not want to approach, well, first of all, we do want to approach people. People say, well, what can one person do? And the answer I think that is very important is stop being one person. They say, what's the first thing I can do as an activist who activist wannabe? I say, the first thing to do is to pick up the phone, call your friend, call your neighbor, say, what are we going to do about this? But the notion of approaching love rather than approaching with anger is something that I struggle with all the time. People struggle with my work sometimes because they don't want me to be making enemies. They say that's not how we get to yes. But the point is, we're not trying to get to yes. In many ways, we're trying to get to no. No more clear cutting, no more destruction of sage grouse habitat, no more polluting of the ocean. And so, how can you approach no through love? I think that's the challenge of the century. And I honestly, I will tell you, I don't want to give up outrage because I think that outrage is an honest response to the vileness of what some people, some corporations, some executives, some politicians are doing quite knowingly and quite intentionally in order to gain short-term profit that is the richest beyond imagining. And that makes me very, very angry. And I think that outrage, that once again, outrage is a measure, the measure of your outrage is a measure of your grief in some ways, and the measure of your love. It's also a measure of your conscience. Outrage is a way of saying that's wrong. And if you didn't express outrage, how would you defend your principles about what's decent and worthy and right? So it's a problem that I face again and again.
So speaking of love and outrage and all of this, and circling back to thinking about my son and your grandchildren, who you write about so beautifully, I've had a really strong sense since my son, when he was very young especially, to protect him from the dire predictions about the future and really give him the opportunity to fall in love first, with the beauty of the earth. And it's a real question in being with young people, when to start being honest with them or how to filter the information. I mean, it's hard to digest as a grown person, let alone a little one, And in the last year, we're having a very warm winter. We supposedly here in Utah have the greatest snow on earth, and we've hardly had any snow at all this winter. It's incredible.
Oh dear.
And we were walking in January, felt like spring, 50 degrees. We have light jackets on, which is very unusual for this time of year. And he said, "Do you think this is from global warming?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm sure that's part of it." And he said, "Are you worried about that?" And I said, "Yes, very much." And he said, "That's not what I wanted you to say, but thank you for telling me the truth." And that's about as deep as we go. I know he'll be exposed to it. How do you interact with your own grandchildren about that? I mean, they're children of biologists, maybe also, you say, so I'm sure they're not sheltered from what's happening.
What you say is so important. I think that your children are really, really lucky to have a parent like you. Yes, we need to take our children out and help them learn to love the world. Oh my God, there's so much, and they're born loving the world. They're born wanting to make connection to it. Just imagine how much parents have to work with when their work is to help a child love the world. That's what they're made to do, and to learn about it. Being honest with the child is essential as well. My sister, who taught kindergarten for many years, did teach in kindergarten about climate change. But she says you never tell a child something bad is going to happen without giving them some tool to combat it. So empowering a child, giving a person knowledge should be with the purpose of empowering them to act. So there she's got these little kids out there planting trees. And feeling really good, because not only do they know that there's a danger out there that will hit them if they're not careful, but that they can do something about it. And I'm sure you're doing that. I'm sure you're doing that with your son.
And you're doing that in your books. I love them so much. Here's something to do. I want to come back to music, and first I want to read this other incredibly gorgeous passage that to me relates so much to embodiment also, as a way of being woven, remembering ourselves as woven into the web of life. So first I'll share this, and then you can talk about it, and then maybe you can talk about the project, the videos that are coming also.
Oh, great, sure.
Okay, so the meaning we harvest by listening. Listen. Breathe Earth's wild music into your body. You are not alone. Here is the harmony of which you are a part. Your joy is the exhalation of birds. Your fear is the pounding of hooves. The depth of your feeling is the depth of time. Your longing is a spring chorus of frogs. And it goes on, and I'm going to pause there. It's so poetic and gorgeous, and I have goosebumps just reading. Oh.
Oh, right. What can I say? Yeah, okay. Thank you again. You read so beautifully, and it moves me to hear those words coming from such a beautiful voice and consciousness. What can I say, Aaron? How can I respond?
Well, maybe you just want to talk about the project with music and the videos and ways of, it sounds like a beautiful thing that's beginning soon, inviting people to these experiences of words and music and Earth's wild music.
I would love to do that. We being the Spring Creek Project at Oregon State University. People might note that because if they Google that, they'll find this great richness of videos that I am about to talk about. We have launched a program that we call Music to Save Earth's Songs. The idea is, once again, calling people to awareness, calling people to love, and then to defend. So we have created a series of 20 tiny concerts. Each one of them is 4 minutes long. We're releasing one every Monday and Thursday. And so far we've released one about the common murre, seabird here in Oregon, and one about grizzly bears, which, by the way, is read by my son, and a biologist who works with he works with salmon, which means that he also works with grizzly bears up in British Columbia. Each one of them is about a particular animal, and each one features a beloved writer, someone you probably know and love. Jane Hirschfield, the poet, Mosley Wata, the essayist, Craig Childs, who writes about deserts. I could go on. They're all wonderful people. Robin Wall Kimmerer, whose work you must know. If you don't, you will love her.
Oh, yes, I'm a big fan.
Yes. So each of these people reads an excerpt from Earth's Wild Music, a 2-minute excerpt from Earth's Wild Music. And then we've invited musicians to respond to the reading, and then we put them together. So we have this weaving of words and music about a particular animal who makes, or a creature that makes sound. They're beautiful. I want everyone to listen to the one that Robin Wall Kimmerer reads, which is the one that's already up there about the common murre. What we're trying to do is to make people aware of the danger to these animals, even as we're making them aware of the glory of them. So it is so much fun. I've never been so excited about a project in all my life, because we're bringing together the human music of the spoken word, the human music of the gamelan and the fiddle and the tuba, together with the music of this natural creature.
Mm. It's just wonderful. I It's been interesting, and I haven't read all your books. I'm sure I will, but I adore your mind and heart and the way they come through on the page. But the you know in the earlier books I've read, that are I would say less on the grief and outrage side and more on the praising the glory of the natural world side, and growing in this. I just have such deep respect for what you invite in your writing. And I was so attached to Great Tide Rising, which was really a life-changing read for me. And I always tell people the title doesn't mean we're all going to be taken under the great tide that is rising, which sounds like a scary prediction of water is coming for you. But the tide of, like, a courageous response rising. That when I thought, music, why is she writing about music? I'm so attached to this other thing. As I was wondering if it was veering off in some very different direction. And of course, the moment I started reading, I just am right back in love with how what you invite and what you, I want to gently say, almost demand. It's like, I'm getting this image of somebody like wanting to turn their face away, and this gently, like, no, nope, here it is. Look at it. Look at it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a natural progression. When I started writing, doing this kind of nature writing, it was all about celebration.
Mm-hmm.
It was about rivers and edges of the water and all the things that I loved. And then it became clear to me that as I was writing them, they were disappearing. And I might write an essay about frog song and then return and find that the marsh had been bulldozed for a condo.
Mm-hmm.
Or I might write about a bird's nest I found and then found that forest had been logged to stumps.
Mm-hmm.
And it became clear to me that this kind of writing couldn't continue. It had to be a switch over from the pure celebration to a defense of it. And that's when the climate change writing began. And that was exactly the same point that I went to a conference in Aspen and heard the dean of the Yale Forestry School said, all we have to do to make sure that we leave a ruined world for our children is to continue doing exactly what we're doing now.
Oh.
And I thought, what am I doing now? I am writing these joyous psalms to the natural world, and I am not calling my readers to any kind of conscience. Mm-hmm. So that was a point of that's where Moral Ground started. That's where Great Tide Rising came. That's where the Piano Tide and now the book about music, Erstwhile Music.
Well, it's been beautifully contagious because I was working with people, and I'm a Feldenkrais practitioner, a somatic educator, and I'm really good at helping privileged people feel better and heal better. And your words had that same kind of sobering effect on me, whereas, I can't not contextualize the work I'm doing outside of exactly what we're talking about today. I think it's so important, and I'm really grateful for your voice. It's had such a big impact.
Well, then I want to tell you about what I'm working on next.
Ooh, exciting.
It's called Take Heart, Encouragement for Earth's Weary Lovers.
Oh.
And that's what it seems to me. It's hard work, what we're called to. It's sad work, what we're called to. It's discouraging. There are setbacks, and we're tired. And so I decided that what people need now are not essays about hope, but essays that would call them to courage. Mm-hmm. And so this is a book that's got 20 essays in it, 24, and each one of them is paired with a drawing, very whimsical drawing by my friend in Canada, whose name is Bob Haverluck. So it's a tiny book. You see, I'm miniaturizing along with the rest of society, and it's fun because it's got these whimsical drawings in it, and it will lift people's hearts. Mm-hmm. That's always this is what my colleagues and I tell each other that we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is we're trying to open people's hearts without breaking them.
It's beautiful.
So this is my latest effort on that. And I haven't been able to find a person who wants to publish it.
I was just going to say, when do we get to read that one? But to be
well, I don't know. It's out. It's out to any number, and it's not. It's very expensive book, of course, because it's small and it's got color pictures in it. So I don't know when you'll see it. It might not be ever, but it's there. It's done.
That's wonderful. I can't wait. I have one. I love that. I don't know if I want to change the subject from taking heart, because I almost had a little bit of tears as you were talking about Earth's weary lovers, and that it's and that phrase of being called, what we're called to. It's hard. It's honest. It's satisfying. It's heartful. I have another little quote from your recent book that I'd love to just share and have you see if you want to add anything to this, which is. Let me see if I can find a way to excerpt the three so I don't read for too long, but there are three things we must now understand. We must understand, number one, that we do not have the luxury of living in ordinary times, but rather the responsibility of living at a unique hinge point in history, the last time humankind will have a choice. To continue with business as usual and watch the planetary systems that support our children's lives fray and fall apart, or to participate in the greatest exercise of the moral imagination the world has ever seen, turning abruptly toward a better way. And, I have been maybe allergic to the word moral for most of my life. And Moral Ground, the collection you edited, that's so beautiful. And your use of moral imagination just feels so important. So that's number one. I don't know if we'll get through all three, but that is just so sobering. And I'm grateful for whoever is listening to this conversation for the willingness to let our hearts be touched by the truth of those words.
Well, notice, shall I interrupt here?
Yes, please.
What I think is important to notice is that it's an invitation to moral imagining. It's an invitation to something better. It's an invitation to create a new world. We won't have a chance again. And I'm inspired by Arundhati Roy. You've probably seen this. May I read you 4 sentences from her?
Yes.
Nothing could be worse than a return to normality. Historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It's a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our data banks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through lightly, with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it.
So beautiful, that invitation to imagination and creativity and calling out to the best in us, really.
Yeah.
So just imagining there's people who might be listening to this conversation right now, and just to circle back to, wow, it's a lot, especially for people who don't tend to really turn toward this kind of sobering information as you do and I do. Is there anything you'd like to offer as like a closing kind of message or invitation or advice, however you want to frame that?
How about a list of 5 reasons to go forward?
Wonderful.
It is not mine. It comes from Jacqueline Mattis, and I read it in the online site called Conversation. She says, number 1, do something. Start with clear, achievable goals. That's exactly right. Number 2, harness the power of uncertainty. Perceive the possibility of success. We don't know what's going to happen. It could go either way. The marble is balanced on top of the pinnacle. We're at a hinge point. Imagine that it could go the right way. So the uncertainty of the future is really a hopeful reason to keep going. Number 3, manage your attention.
Mm.
Pay attention to the things that drive you forward rather than drag you down.
Mm.
Watch out what you're looking at on the TV, on your screens, listening to on the radio. Manage your attention. Number 4, seek community. Don't try to do it alone.
Mm.
Number 5, look at the evidence of history. The arc of history moves towards justice. And history can show us again and again how people faced terrible decision points and made the right choice.
Mm. Mm. Just beautiful. Kathleen, I'm so grateful to meet you. It's a sort of dream come true for me. And I just want to say thank you for your work in the world, for your courage and your heart, and just the way you bring it forth. I'm deeply touched and grateful.
Thank you, Erin. I don't know if I have ever been more buoyed and lifted by an interview. And I appreciate very much what you brought to it, which is all this loving attention and all this reading and a very sharp imagination and a very big heart. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you enjoy this podcast, it's great if you want to share it with friends or post about it on social media. Also, you could make a donation to support the podcast or find out more information about our classes and offerings at our website, embodimentmatters.com.